it looks like it's really kind of changing the way these commercial real estate projects are able to connect with people who might want to invest in them. And get this, it's predicted to handle like billions of dollars worth of these transactions by like mid 2025. So pretty wild stuff. So we're going to really dive into this and see how it works and why everybody's talking about it.
Yeah, it's really something. You know what I think is really cool about CRE Fast Track is that it's more than just your typical, real estate listings. It's like think of it like a high-tech matchmaker, using like AI to connect investors with commercial properties that actually, make sense for their investment plans.
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's not just any property though, right? It's got to be some pretty specific type of commercial real estate we're talking about here.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So CRE Fast Track is laser focused on properties that actually generate income. So, think office buildings, shopping centers, industrial warehouses, that kind of stuff. Stuff that brings in a steady stream of cash. It's all about making those smart financial connections between the investors and the opportunities.
Okay, I gotcha. So we've got this, like you said, matchmaking thing going on, and we know it's got to be commercial property that can bring in some money. So let's get into the details here, because what we found is they have this whole like tiered system. They call them packages, and it goes from bronze all the way up to platinum. So walk us through these, like what each one offers and who they're designed for, like who should be looking at these different packages.
Yeah, absolutely. So they've basically set it up so that no matter your needs or your budget, there's a level for you. So let's say you're a property owner and you're trying to get funding for a project. With the bronze package, for just $500 a month, they'll get info about your property out to like 50,000 investors. It's like a super targeted marketing campaign, but it's directly to people who could potentially invest.
Wow, that's a lot of people for that price. I mean, that seems like a great starting point, if you're just kind of testing it out. So what about silver then? What do you get if you step up to that level?
So with silver, you start getting some more personalized support. For $1,000 a month, you get everything in bronze, plus you get a dedicated investor relations manager. They basically follow up with anyone who's interested, and they send you weekly reports to keep you updated on the progress. It's perfect for those who want someone, kind of holding their hand through the whole process.
So it's not just about blasting out the info. It's actually about working those connections, getting people invested. I can see how that would be a big deal when you're trying to raise money. So, all right, let's talk gold. What makes that one special, and how much does it cost?
Gold is where your reach really expands. So for $1,500 a month, they share your property info with 150,000 investors. And to keep your project, top of mind, they send out multiple follow-up emails and even make calls to these potential investors. It's for those property owners who are serious and really want a comprehensive approach.
Okay, so gold is really stepping it up in terms of visibility and the follow-through. And finally, let's get to the top tier. Platinum. This has got to be where they pull out all the stops. So what does a platinum subscription get you, and how much are we talking?
Yeah, platinum is definitely the VIP treatment. It's designed for high-value properties that need that maximum exposure and personalized attention. So it's $2,500 a month, and your project gets in front of 200,000 investors. And it's not just sending info. They personally follow up with every single investor who shows any interest. They even call everyone who opened the initial email. Plus, you get ongoing, like, super tailored support throughout the whole process.
Sounds like they roll out the red carpet with that platinum package. So now that we have a good idea of what the different tiers are, I got to ask about this prediction we saw. I mean, our sources are saying that the prices for all these packages are going to jump up by like the middle of 2025. Do you have any idea why that might be?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on here. So first, CRE Fast Track is gaining a lot of traction. People are seeing that it actually works. It's connecting projects with funding successfully. So naturally, demand is going to increase. More property owners and investors are going to want in, and that gives them the ability to adjust pricing, supply and demand.
Yeah, that makes sense. If it's working, people are going to pay more for it. So what else do you think might be driving this price hike?
Well, we could also probably expect them to add some new bells and whistles.
Yeah.
Enhance the features, expand their database of investors. They already have an impressive list of high net worth individuals, but they're not just going to sit back and relax. They're constantly trying to improve and stay ahead of the game.
So it's not just taking advantage of the popularity, they're actually putting in the work to justify the higher price. And what's the third factor? You mentioned there were a few.
Well, you can't ignore the overall growth of the commercial real estate market. I mean, as the industry grows and the transactions become more complex, a platform like CRE Fast Track becomes even more valuable They're really positioning themselves as like the go-to solution for navigating this whole world.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's all connected to those bigger trends in the market. Now let's change gears a bit and talk about some of the features that you get no matter what package you choose. And one thing that really stuck out to me from what we've been reading is their focus on really personalizing the way they promote each property. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that look like practically?
Yeah, that's one of the things that sets them apart from, just a basic listing site. They understand that you can't just use the same approach for every property. It just doesn't work when you're trying to get investors excited. So they really tailor the promotional materials to each property's strengths and make sure they're speaking to the right audience.
So it's not just putting info out there, it's about crafting a story that gets investors interested. And speaking of audience, their investor database is mind-blowing. I mean, 2 million high net worth individuals and institutions. That's a huge amount of potential capital. So how do they actually connect the right investors with the right projects?
That's where their AI really comes into play. It goes way beyond just listing properties. It actually analyzes the data to figure out which investors are most likely to be interested, based on the specific type of project.
So it's not just matching up square footage with dollar amounts, it's understanding what both sides want. That's pretty impressive. And one last thing before we move on, we got to talk about their subscription model because they're month to month, right? You can use it when you need it, no long-term contracts, which is awesome,
Right.
especially for property owners who might not need it all year round. So we've covered a lot of ground here, and you've given us some really great insights into how CRE Fast Track works. But our listeners are probably thinking, okay, so what? How does this affect me? What's the big takeaway here?
You're right. We need to put this into context. So think of CRE Fast Track as like a prime example of how technology is shaking up the whole real estate investment world. It's about efficiency, it's about access, and opening up opportunities that may not have existed before.
It's fascinating how tech is changing the rules of the game for everyone involved. But I get some people are worried that a platform like this will just end up helping those who are already wealthy, you know, concentrating wealth instead of opening things up.
Yeah, that's a valid concern and definitely a conversation worth having.
Yeah.
While it does have the potential to open doors for more investors, we need to be mindful of that potential downside.
We definitely need to be thinking about how to make sure everyone benefits, not just those who are already at the top. Now, before we get too deep into that, I want to take a closer look at how the AI actually works to match up properties with investors. We keep saying AI driven, but I'm sure our listeners are wondering what's really going on behind the scenes. So, can you break down the algorithms a little bit and tell us how they pinpoint those ideal matches?
Sure, so imagine a system that not only looks at basic stuff like property type and investment amount, but it also digs into an investor's past behavior, what they've invested in before, their preferences, even things like location, are they interested in sustainable features, what's their risk tolerance, that kind of stuff. And that's what CRE Fast Track is doing with its AI.
Wow, so it's not just a simple match. It's like getting to know both the property and the investor to find those hidden connections.
Exactly. And the more data they have, the better they get at making those matches.
So how do they get all that data on the investors? Are investors giving them all this information or are they getting it from somewhere else?
It's kind of both. So when investors sign up, they give some basic information about their goals and what they're looking for. But CRE Fast Track also uses data analytics and public information to build a more complete profile for each investor. That way, they can constantly refine their process and find those connections that might not be obvious at first glance.
That's incredibly smart. It sounds like they're really pushing the limits of what tech can do in real estate. But with all that data collection, what about privacy? I mean, people are going to be concerned about that.
You're absolutely right. Data privacy is super important. So CRE Fast Track is all about transparency and giving users control over their data. Investors can manage their privacy settings and choose what they want to share. And the platform uses strong security measures to protect sensitive data and make sure they're following all the rules.
Well, that's good to hear. It's important that they're taking that seriously. Now, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. The idea that CRE Fast Track could make real estate investing accessible to more people. We discussed the concerns about it possibly making inequality worse. But let's flip that around. What are some ways it could actually make things more fair and open up opportunities for a wider range of investors?
That's a key question, and I really do think there's potential for positive change here. Imagine, for example, a group of small business owners who want to pool their money and invest in a local property. In the past, they might not have had the connections or the know-how to do that. But with CRE Fast Track, those opportunities are within reach.
So it's about breaking down those barriers and